Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. This podcast is a production of Swaim Strategies, a consulting firm dedicated to nonprofit fundraising events. We're coming to you today from the studios of the AV department. Please welcome our hosts, Kristen Steele and Samantha Swaim.
Hello, and welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. I'm super excited today because I get to interview the always amazing Samantha Swaim, my co-host here on the podcast, and we are going to talk about small, curated events and the potential that they hold for your organization. I would be remiss, however, if I didn't actually do a formal introduction of Sam, because I feel like sometimes we sit here and we talk to all these amazing people, and for folks who have picked up midstream with us, they may not know what we do, who we are, all those things. Fair. So I've got a little bio put together. We're going to go through, and then I want to dive into curated at small events.
Awesome.
And the
I
potential
get the full guest experience today.
You do. Full tilt boogie.
All right.
Samantha's love affair with live events began long before she knew fundraising existed. With a background steeped in theater and television production, she understood something fundamental. The magic happens when you can feel the energy shift in a room, when an audience moves from passive observers to active participants in something bigger than themselves. Today, as co-author of planning a successful major donor event, founder of the annual Elevate Conference, and co-host of the Fundraising Elevator podcast, Samantha is on a mission to elevate the entire sector, one story, one room, one perfectly orchestrated paddle raise at a time, because she knows that when nonprofits get their events right, they don't just raise money, they build the communities that change the world. Thank you for all that you do, and thanks for joining me in the hot seat today.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Excellent. So I know this because I have a front row seat to what you do, that events are never rinse and repeat for you.
Yeah.
Not only in terms of kind of event, scope of the event, what's happening at the event, who's in the room for a specific organization, but also as we move through time. Events continue to morph and change given the context that they're operating in and all of the circumstances happening around them, both in the organization and in their bigger communities and societies. Right now, when this airs, will be May of 2026.
Yeah.
We were just talking the other day how much has changed since 2020.
Yeah.
And while it feels like a blip because there was so much collapse time in there with the pandemic, it's also been a really big evolution around events and what we're seeing work for organizations. Let's talk about why curated events are something you're diving into head first.
Well, I think we're in this interesting time and place right now because work life has gotten a little bit more engagement through virtual connection, right? So a lot of organizations have let go of expensive office spaces. A lot of people are working at home either part-time or full-time. And connection is often happening via a chat, a text message, a Zoom call. But there is something that is different about those connections in that you don't get the biochemistry, feel good of eye contact, of understanding where someone's coming from, seeing their body language, understanding the context that they're framed within. You just don't get all that in a Zoom call. Zoom calls, don't get me wrong, they're, an amazing way to connect, and I'm glad that we can connect with people all around the world that way. But there is this need right now in the nonprofit sector to think about how we invite people to be a part of our mission. As big grant funding is going away, as a lot of big philanthropy is changing, both for the good and the bad, we are seeing that donors are feeling more disconnected, and yet there is a ton of potential, and it is still the biggest revenue resource most nonprofits have is through individual giving and donors. So for me, a curated event is thinking about who is the person I am trying to engage and how do I invite them in, really simply. Pre-2020, I would have said to you, fundraising events are not the easiest way to raise money. Right. They are very time consuming and can be moderate yields. So if you're going to invest in a fundraising event, think strategically about one, maybe two events that fit your specific model for your specific need and are very thoughtful and strategic to what your needs are at the time. But I think universally right now, the need is inviting people back in. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to always have a big gala. So that's why I've been really diving into, okay, what are the other forms of gathering people that are not just the big ballroom, 500 people, paddles in the air.
Yeah. And I love what you're pointing out too, contextually what's going on, because I think we're back to that flatness idea of a screen.
Yeah.
If that's the context we're operating in-person small events pop in a different way than in lives populated with that all the time, where we're able to have human connection all the time.
Yeah.
So there's sort of a unique value proposition there. And also the idea that that people might be looking to experience the world in a different way because of that blur, right?
Yeah.
That blur of, we're kind of back to that blur of work, home, all of those things. And I think about what that means for people to be able to step out of that and into something else as an opportunity. But also I think, what does that thing need to be to drive that behavior? Because we've made it that, going to work virtually, there aren't a lot of barriers to that. There's easy, right? So the idea of motivation to get up, to get out of the house, to be in person has its own drive that needs to happen with events that maybe we haven't had to think about before. When you think about curated events, you sort of just defined what that is for you. Can you get a little bit more granular? Because I think as an idea, people go, okay. And then can you talk about what the purpose of a small curated event is for you when you're looking at an organization and their full sort of scope of engagement with donors over the course of a year?
Yeah. So a couple of episodes ago, we were talking about cultivation events.
Yep.
Cultivation events are a very specific model. It is a model to introduce your work to a new donor, utilize a couple of key stakeholders to invite folks in, oftentimes a private home, something of that sort. To me, we can get even more specific and more granular. And I think a curated event can be far ranging, but I'm always looking to, where are the gaps that you're trying to fill and who are the people you're trying to engage in your work? Oftentimes, the biggest need that we hear is organizations have a lapsed donor base or an about to lapse, meaning that they haven't made a gift in over a year. They haven't engaged in any meaningful way. And my question is, how do we capture those about to lapse folks before they lapse and re-engage them in making them feel seen and valued and a part of the work of the organization? So I will get to your question, but big picture, I think there's this bigger need at hand. So not only do we have nonprofits with a gap of we haven't been inviting people in as many and as frequent ways, right? We haven't had board meetings in person. We haven't had staff meetings in person. We haven't had volunteer days as often. So many organizations cut their volunteer programs that where people used to find kind of third space community around a cause. It's now things like sign up for, endorse this, follow us on social media. And that's not relationship
They're still
building.
at arm's length that way. Yeah.
You don't feel belonging.
Correct.
Right. And
Correct.
yet there's this huge gap in what's being coined the recession connection or connection recession, where people are feeling less and less connected and are feeling isolated and are feeling lonely and are feeling like their lives and social connections are through scrolling versus through actual engagement in community. And all of a sudden, there's this huge uprising of small gatherings, intimate gatherings that are happening of an individual inviting 10 people over for a theme night, making pizza party, or friends getting together to do PowerPoint presentations about their dream vacation or what they do for a living, or to debate a cause or debate an issue. And I want to argue that I think nonprofits are sitting in that same boat, in that we also are feeling a connection recession.
Yeah.
We are not as close together in our work, and we are not as close to our key stakeholders, like our board members, our committee members, our volunteers, when all those programs have been stripped back to Zoom calls. And we're less connected to our donors, to our sponsors. Therefore, a way to invite people back in might be as simple as an in-person board meeting. That might be a first starting point. But I think frequently when we're talking about events, people immediately go to the big signature event gala. And I am arguing right now that I actually think we have this other opportunity, which is to ask people to come back to the work that they once believed so deeply in. And likely there is a sense of grief and loss for your donors and for former board members and key stakeholders who are no longer supporting you, because they once were very invested and involved in your organization. And when some of those opportunities to volunteer, to be involved went away, there's probably a sense of grief there that needs to be repaired. And a simple invitation in might do that.
Right.
So a curated event to me is first starting with who are the people we're trying to invite back in, and how do we get really specific to that demographic?
Yep.
So board members, if we're trying to re-engage our board members and get them more involved and more invested, the simple answer might be in-person board meetings. Like that might be the curated event. But donors, let's say, for example, I was talking to an organization last week that had a big drop off of 20% of their corporate support disappeared. Individuals saying no, not less money, but people saying no. And when we went back to that 20%, those 20% folks are folks that are having profitable years. They're doing well fiscally. When you look at their sort of report outs of how their like economic health looks, they're strong organizations. They're supporting other organizations.
So on paper, they should still be a yes.
Right. And so then the question became, well, how do we invite them back?
Right.
So in that particular case, to me, the answer is a curated invitation that might be as simple as a coffee meeting, but might lead to a bigger conversation like a sponsor symposium or a sponsor lunch. But my favorite thing that I have seen lately is simply a dinner or lunch gathering that is intentionally small, curated, experiential, but designed for the audience at hand.
Yep.
So something like a lunch with our amazing humans who have supported us in the past. We're going to have a tour of our venue. We're going to show you our new program area, and we're going to enjoy a lunch in the lobby where you are going to be able to meet all of our staff. Something that intimately connects them to each other, something that intimately connects them to the experience of your mission and allows you to rebuild relationship. Because likely in the past decade, you've had staff turnover, you've had leadership change, you've had, major program evolution, and an invitation back in sometimes is the only thing that we need.
Well, and I think, too, thinking about inertia is real, both within organizations and for your donors. And so as the introvert in the room, the idea of like, cool, you sent me your printed invite to your 400-person event.
Right.
Or someone makes a phone call to me and invites me to a curated dinner that I know is like-minded people, smaller in scale, and you talk to me about the purpose.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm feeling hoodwinked into something. It's clear that, like, we would just like to see you.
Well, and I think hospitality is an undervalued tool that we don't understand. Well, there's a couple of things about what you just said. We would like to see you says you are valued and seen and you are part of something.
Yep.
And that is a giant motivator for giving. And then the act of hospitality tells the individual, this is a place that cares about my support, that cares about me, that is invested in me. And if it doesn't have to be super fancy, to be done in a way that feels respectful of the work and the mission and tells those stories in a way that people feel a sense of, oh, this is a successful organization. This is a thriving organization. I think there was a hesitancy during the pandemic of, am I investing in something that's going to continue to exist? Is this an organization who's closing doors? That same hesitancy is back right now based on federal funds. So if you're an organization that received massive federal funding and there's a risk of you losing that funding, donors have a hesitancy about, should I continue giving to this organization? Are they going to be around next week? Yep. I want my funds to be used, not to be like part of a foreclosure agreement or a merger, an acquisition agreement. So in that, being able to create a sense of trust is so much easier when we actually bring people into a conversation and into a room and we're in dialogue with them about that.
We tell them the actual story of where we are and what we're
Right.
doing and how that looks right now. So in these gatherings, I think there are donor psychology principles at work.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the potential of intimate settings and unlocking generosity and what that can look like?
Yeah. So first of all, I think that
Because I mean that in a broader sense. Like, it's not like all of these have a direct ask associated, though many of them will. But this sense of getting people back into that lane of generosity and feeling that way toward your organization.
Yeah, so I'm going to pull forward a very specific example.
Great.
So we were working with an organization that has a physical building, physical location, which I think applies to all like community centers, gay and lesbian centers, schools, education hubs, like any organization that has a physical building. And they had recently made some changes to their program area that were really cool, but no one would ever know that unless you were a participant that walked in the doors. Their service was to youth, and their doors were open midday while adults were at work, kids were in their facility. So in the evenings, they asked each of their board members to host a table for 10 at a small 10-person dinner. And in that, they had 7 weeks in a row where they engaged the same catering team for 7 weeks to come and serve a dinner for 10. And in that, the person who was hosting it, the board member who was hosting it, picked the menu with the catering team and invited the 10 people. But they were...
So investment level up, investment level up, investment level up. Yep.
And they were strategically pulling forward the things that they love, right? So, for example, the first board member who kicked off loves whiskey. And so that board member built everything around a whiskey tasting. He invited specifically folks on the donor list and sponsorship list who had lapsed, who had not been involved in a while, but who he knew. And so he identified very specific, small, targeted audience. He was bringing 8 people, and then he and his spouse were participating. He designed a whiskey tasting menu with the caterer, and then the caterer also designed like a barbecue forward meal. And when they came into the event, they brought their donors into the front door, welcomed them, and immediately right there was the executive director, the development director, and the board member that was hosting. And they were handed a glass of champagne. They were welcomed. It was small. They were offered a seat. It was their lobby, so there was lounge furniture nearby. And it was just casual conversation until everyone had arrived. And then the executive director was introduced by the board chair. And he indicated, "This is our executive director. It's my honor to introduce you to the work by a tour." And the executive director took everyone on a tour and showed them the new program space and the impact it was having. So this is something that Tammy Zonker coins a story tour, where they walked through 3 or 4 different areas, and in each area paused with a story of what that sort of program offering was, the impact it was having on kids. They weren't talking about like the chalkboard on the walls and the toys in the room. They're talking about the healing impact and the benefits of that program. And then they were invited to dinner. And at dinner, the board member indicated, "I've chosen for us tonight a whiskey tasting and a barbecue dinner because these are 2 of my favorites." And as each course came out, the board member was talking about why he volunteers and why he's on the board and what his investment level. And at the end of that night, he thanked everyone for coming. He told them that he would love for them all to stay involved. He was going to be sending them an email with opportunities to volunteer, opportunities to donate, and opportunities to invite other people to learn more about the organization. And by the time they got home, they had an email in their inbox from him. They repeated that 7 times in a row. 7 small, it didn't take any logistics on their part. They had the table, they had the chairs, they had the catering partner that partnered with them. And every single dinner was a slightly different curated event based on that individual. And what it did was it allowed for someone who was a key stakeholder in the organization to bring in people who he had a relationship with. So therefore he was creating influence. It allowed them to immediately get connected via story to the location the mission, the people at the organization meet the executive director. They were able to ask questions and learn more about the impact. And then casually over dinner, over whiskey, over, conversation, natural conversation occurred where questions came up. And in that, you get eye contact, you get something called collective effervescence, where you start to create something bigger than just what the one person can impact. So now it's not just about the board member's impact. It's about what can his table of friends all do that can create impact. Yeah. And when you have that sort of eye contact conversation, breaking bread together dinner, all of a sudden there is an oxytocin release, there is a dopamine release, and these two things have been coined. Dopamine's been coined or oxytocin has been coined the moral molecule. It's the thing that when it's present, people feel a sense of trust, a sense of wanting to do good, a sense of wanting to be part of the solution. And then he made an ask when he already had built up a sense of belonging, a sense of connection, a sense of emotional engagement. He made an ask that was diverse in how people could engage, but his expectation was he was inviting them to continue to be involved. Yeah. Out of these small gatherings, it required that the executive director and the development director stayed 2 hours past their regular schedule 1 day a week for 7 weeks. And they supplemented that for themselves by taking a Monday off here and there so that they were sort of offsetting it. And out of it, they yielded a huge return of corporate partners who had lapsed and major donors who had lapsed. In total, they had 70 people dine with them. But each one was a small gathering that allowed conversation. It allowed everyone to have a voice. It allowed questions. Where in a gala, sometimes you're just socializing with the people with you. You're not actually... Or not.
You're at a table of 10 people. You have no idea who they are.
True.
And you're just there.
Right.
Yeah.
So I feel like right now, our opportunity is to think about how can we specifically leverage the relationships to invite people back. Yep. And sometimes I think it might be as specific as 10 people around a dinner table. Yeah. It might be more generic, like a volunteer day, or it may be that you have a program offering that you can open up to the public. Like we're having a concert and we would really love for you to be there. Yeah. Anyone who is a cultural arts organization, I think should be thinking about how do they set aside 20 VIP tickets that they are intentionally going through lapsed donor lists and going through lapsed sponsor lists and inviting people back in and hosting them, welcoming them. Joe, I'm so glad you're here. We've been so excited to find out you're coming to the show today. Welcome them, host them, check in with them afterwards, send them a thank you. That idea of being in relation, I think, is the biggest need right now and the biggest opportunity.
The light bulb for me is going on in terms of that model specifically being the best articulation of the table host model ever, right? Mm-hmm. That it's sort of taking a deep dive on the principles when we set up the table host model for bigger galas where you engaged 30 table hosts versus 300 people, and then they go to their networks to make asks to bring a table together to come and learn about the organization and donate. But this is in a very intimate, connected way, making people come right up against the mission in a way that maybe they don't in a gala, in their ability. Just, hearing you talking about people asking questions and, the scale of it means that I could ask anything, right? And they've set up a space where it's like, actually, no, we didn't lose any federal funding because of this, this, and this. I think there's a lot of misnomers happening around what's going on in the nonprofit sector. I'm wondering, too, we had a client a long time ago that had blown their gala out to be 1,000-person affair. Yeah. And we talk a lot about, the right people in the room. Right. That volume versus quality, those are different things. And what they ended up doing was really scaling down to like a 250-person VIP dinner, which in my brain is sort of in this ballpark too when you're talking about small curated events versus their 1,000-person gala. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about some of those misconceptions that nonprofits have when they assume that bigger events mean bigger returns. I think people are like, well, our event's only 250 people.
Right. Well, I want to go to that
or
example.
100 people or whatever the size of their event is. I think we get fed this idea because this organization over here got some press and their 500 person, maybe $1 million gala is all over. And then we go, God, I can't do that.
Yeah. I want to go to that specific example because I actually think there's 3 kind of key elements for the conversation there. So they had a big event. Big. So many people. But in that, there were so many different needs at that event that they weren't serving any of them, right? And so they were feeling like each of the 3 needs that were sort of identified were underperforming. So we broke out those specific needs and we actually surveyed the audience. And then we talked to a bunch of key constituents, stakeholders that were like table hosts, board members, and sponsors. And we just said, why are you at this event? That's the one thing we want to know is why do you show up? And what we found was our assumptions were true. There were 3 reasons why people were there. 2 of them were very community-centric focus. So they had an audience of volunteers who were so tied into this cause, that loved this work, that loved this cause, that this was their way to come and be a part of the celebration, right? Like they wanted the party, the networking, the joy, the celebration of the work that they do. The second one was, it was an advocacy organization. So they had a huge turnout of politicians that came to show their support. And so they weren't there to give. They weren't there.
They weren't even there to stay till the end of the party.
They weren't there long.
It was a see and be seen.
They were there to show their support and politically kind of mark on a box like, yes, I'm in alignment with your mission.
Yes.
And then there were the donors. And the interesting thing is the donors were frustrated because the noise and the like rowdiness of the crowd and the joy and the excitement and the party was overshadowing the fundraising. And when we segmented it out, we identified that we really only had about 250 donors that were big key stakeholder donors whose comfort zone and happy spot was raising their paddle, right? Like they wanted to be seen as a generous person and they wanted to give in that way. But then we had this whole other group, these 2 groups, that they were not happy raising. That was not a comfortable place for them. They were not happy raising a paddle. So they were just having a side party, basically.
Right.
So in that, we divided that event because it was clear that the need for community celebration and public recognition around an advocacy program was important. Like that was a key why and purpose behind this event. If nothing else, when you bring 1,000 people together and they leave there having a really good time, you have an invested 1,000 people who feel like this is a place for me. This is a place where I belong. But in order to fit the needs, we segmented the event with a lower dollar party ticket and called it the main event because it was really the thing that most people were coming to. And in that, there were like transactional engagements people could participate in. You could get your photo taken. There was a photo booth. There were bites and bars available. There was a dance floor. There was a DJ. There were performers. And there were a couple things like a raffle or a couple silent auction items. But in the dinner, we called that the pre-event VIP fundraising dinner. In fact, we didn't even call it VIP. No. We called it the fundraising dinner, the pre-event fundraising dinner. And there was a higher ticket price associated with that because you were sitting down and having a full meal. And in that, we were doing an auction and a paddle race. The program was short. It was like 90 minutes. The entire dinner was 2 hours. Guests came from 5:30 to 7:30, and the main event started at 7. So as the dinner doors opened, they flowed into the like dance party that was already happening.
Based on their proclivity.
Or go home. And all of a sudden we found that everyone's needs were being met. Now, over time, that changes, right? Yes. Over time, more people were interested in the fundraising dinner. Over time, less people were interested in the dance party event. And so we had to reevaluate and reshape that again. And then it changed again because over time, the political contingent became a stronger need. And all of a sudden, we had this like influx of folks who they had a different priority. So we interviewed, surveyed, and adjusted. But though that's like a big event, parsing into smaller events. To serve a purpose. And I think that that's the key thing that people miss all the time, is asking, what is the purpose that we are inviting people to be a part of? If you can start there, if you can ask yourself the bigger question, what will we gain by gathering these people? What is the thing we want them knowing? What is the thing we want them to leave here and do? That changes our event design, our modality, who we're inviting, why we're inviting. Priya Parker actually states that there's an important element of knowing when to close the door and who's in and who's not in. If you are trying to be everything to everyone, you will be nothing to no one.
That's right.
And yet, if you try to be very specific to who your audience is and what your purpose is, you can now design for that. Community-centric events have a very specific purpose and goal. Not all events should be community-centric events. Major donor events have a very specific purpose and goal. Not all events should be major donor events. And understanding kind of how to really identify key audience and why or purpose of the gathering, you might actually find that 20 people going on a wine tour and meeting the winemakers and learning about healthcare gaps in the wine industry might serve your mission better than a big fancy seated gala.
Well, and I think, to your point, naming purpose, your purpose is not for us to have a major donor event.
Right.
Like, that's not your purpose.
Right.
And actually, I think folks elevate their game exponentially when they get away from their purpose being about dollars at all and fundraising at all. Because then they start to design for who they are as an organization and who they want in the room.
Yep.
And then when done well, the fundraising follows.
Right.
So I hear you, development professionals out there going, I can't do another event. I can't do another 12 events. Does that mean I give up my event? Can we talk about development strategy and how smaller curated events fit in? Can people fit them in with their big gala? Should people toss out their gala and start focusing on this? Like, I think, how can you fortify people to take a look at their events calendar and what they're doing and how this might be an opportunity for them?
I think that having an assessment of really what's possible for your organization is the starting point. Understanding like staff capacity, time, and energy, but also understanding need. So it may be that the need you have is very targeted to a small group of major donors that you're trying to invest in legacy giving and planned giving. That might be where you put your focus this year. Next year, the goal might be a much bigger goal that as we celebrate an anniversary, our goal is to invite people back into the organization. Anniversaries, I want to say, no one cares about your anniversary as much as you do, but they do become a good story of inviting people back.
They're an opportunity.
They're an opportunity to invite people back. But I think the first thing is understanding capacity and need. If you understand need, you might find that you scrap some of your other things you're doing and you design for those specific goals that you have in mind. But I also feel like when you're talking about a curated event, when you're talking about this is a very small targeted audience with a very targeted outcome, it often is much less work. It's often something that you can plan in a couple of hours. We're going to make a call to that catering partner that we love working with, that's easy to work with. We're going to look on our schedule and pick a day that works with us. And we're going to call that board member and ask them if they can host it in their house. That sort of planning time is so much more condensed. And the invite list and managing invites is so much more condensed that I think sometimes when you're thinking curated, you also need to think simple is better.
Well, and it allows you to focus that energy that you would have spent on all those logistics on the actual experience. The storytelling. What does that room feel like in terms of who's there, who's talking, what does that look like? What are you sharing?
Well, and you started the conversation that it's not rinse and repeat between events, but here's an example where if you were doing a series, like for example, you were doing 7 board members hosting dinners, each of them a 10-person dinner, or each of them in their own homes. you may have a piece of your program that you repeat, meaning your a video that you share or your executive director speech.
Of course.
So being able to put a little bit of time in and then repeating that for different audiences, I think opens up a door where it's less time, but it's more specific. And then you have to make that ask still.
Yep.
There has to be that component that says, here's the need, here's our mission, here's what we're doing, and you still invite people in some way. The ask is something we've been talking a lot about lately because it is something that doesn't actually relieve the brain, help people feel connected, help people feel a path toward being involved if we don't make that ask. It's like constantly saying, ready, set, ready, set, and never initiating the go, never giving people that open door to say, okay, here it is.
Right.
When we say, here's our need, here's what we do, here is the challenges we're facing, all we're doing is the ready, set. We're not inviting people to be a part of it. So every event, big or small, needs an ask element to relieve the pressure on the brain and be that go moment that says, here's your way to get involved. It could be as simple as, I'm sending you an email and I want you to come work one of our volunteer days.
Yeah.
I'm sending you an email to donate and there's going to be a button in there. Or it could be, will you write a $1,000 check right now? I mean, there's lots of ways you can make that ask. But I do think that when we identify both who on our team has capacity and whose role it is, what our specific needs are, we can then start to answer the question of what event are we doing based on that assessment, based on who are we trying to invite in, and then think about what is the simplest, lightest lift way we can do this that's still hospitality forward and meaningful to the people in attendance.
Yeah, and I think there is a critical difference to using that word. The difference between who are we going to invite and who are we going to invite in.
Yes.
It's critical. We're going to take a quick break.
Great.
We're going to thank some of our amazing sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to keep talking a little bit more about small curated events and how you can put them into play at your organization. We'll be right back.
Ready to take your fundraising to the next level? Need to get unstuck in your event planning? Now's your chance to connect directly with the experts behind the fundraising elevator. Book a one-on-one consulting session with Sam for strategic planning and fundraising strategy, with Kristen for your programming and storytelling, or Mary for your registration and data tools. They're here to provide you personalized answers to all your event questions. Don't wait. Raise more at your next fundraising event. Book your session today at swaimstrategies.com. You can also find the link in our show notes.
Welcome back. We are here with Samantha Swaim. We're talking about small curated donor events. And I was actually thinking before the break, we have a client who has an evergreen theme name for their event.
Yep.
And what that event looks like changes every year. One year, it's an invited 200-person event. The next, it's a very specific 90-person curated event. It's all happening under the same banner of that event, which allows them to sort of stay in people's minds of this is our blah, blah, blah event this year.
Right.
And the shape of it can change to meet their moment. And I think some flex for organizations in thinking about how their events meet their moment and how you bring donors in to meet that moment is really critical right now. Can you talk about donor behavior post-pandemic and how it's shifted in ways that makes this small, curated event model even more relevant right now?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers and the analysis now, I mean, don't get me wrong, sometimes the data isn't perfect data, but there's a lot of giving data coming out from Giving USA and sort of giving trends that are occurring where what we're seeing is individuals are still very invested in giving. Individuals are actually giving more. They're just sometimes giving deeper to one organization. So pre-pandemic, we saw a lot of people kind of investing in a lot of organizations. And now what we're seeing is a lot of times an individual is invested in one organization or a family is invested in two organizations. The other thing that we're seeing is generationally, there's a giving shift that's happening, that boomers were often very transactional. The prize, the gala, the photo, the society page, I want that auction package was really a transactional motivation for boomers. As you move into sort of more wealth transfer into Gen X, there's a shift toward it's my time is valuable, use it well. And also I'm invested in the cause. I want to raise my paddle and give cash. Then as we get into younger generations, we're seeing there's actually a deeper investment of, I'll give cash, but I also want to give my time. So then there's a bigger shift happening where people are investing both time and money, which is why understanding what community-centric fundraising is so important, because we're moving toward that naturally as just human evolution. Generationally, younger donors are more interested in, if I'm going to be there, I want it to have an impact. So they're more interested in a volunteer day than they are in a gala. But knowing those shifts and those behaviors often means we invite them in differently. I was just talking to an organization who said, the majority of our donors are younger donors who see kind of this impact on their community, their friends, their peer group, and they want to come and be a part of the work we're doing. And the gala fit is just not right for them. They come and it feels like this is so disjointed. And so they started hosting movie screening nights, bingo nights, dance party nights, where it was once a month they had something on the calendar that was just a social engagement for getting involved. And every single time there was a text to give feature, a paddle raise, a raffle package, there was always a way to participate in giving. And there was always a story element shared. There was always a pause in the action to share what they were impact they were having or wins they had that month. But they were keeping it really invested in who their audience was. So I think we're just seeing this generational shift, and we're seeing people more interested in having impact. But we are seeing people go deeper where they have relationship. And that is that right there is the data that I go, we need to be inviting people back in. We need to be thinking about, it doesn't have to be the way it's always been, but we can't just assume that email is going to yield the revenue generation for our missions that inviting people to be a part of and volunteering one day and attending an event could do.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a thread you hear week to week on this show, regardless of topic and who we're talking to, it is that this work has to be based in relationship to survive, period, the end. And so organizations that continue to lean into relationship, but also allow those relationships to develop and change over time as their donor base grows and changes over time, I think the best events continue to be relevant to the moment that they're in versus trying to shoehorn people into a form that isn't relevant to them. When I'm thinking about our nonprofit development superheroes out there going in to build this case with leadership or the board. How do nonprofits overcome that fear of leaving money on the table by not casting a wider net at their event in terms of more people in the room's better, right?
Well, I think look at your own data. That's the easiest place to look is, are you having big events and is it yielding more revenue for you? If you're having big events and they're declining in revenue, then the question would be, okay, how do we segment this? And how do we design specifically for different audiences? I think that the component that I want to land on too is that it's not just an invite in through a gala, right? It's also an invite in through a meeting. It's also an in-person. It's also an invite in through a volunteer day. It's thinking about what are all the touch points and ways that we're bringing people into the organization. And in the nonprofit sector, I think we tend to trend toward acquisition addiction. I need new donors. I need new donors. But when an individual has given to you, they have signaled to you that they're interested. What are you doing with that signal? What are you doing with the people who gave once? I think it is very natural for us as humans to say they gave already. They're not going to give again. But that second gift, if you've received that second gift within the next 60 days, they are 84% more likely to become a lifetime donor to your organization, because what happened is they gave a gift, you were in contact with them, you understood why they were giving, what their interest areas were, you invited them to give in another way, they felt seen. Now that they feel seen, their investment level goes up. The value that they get out of this organization goes up, because now they have a sense of belonging, and belonging is powerful. When people feel that neurological connection to belonging, their nervous systems are regulated and are calmer. They are able to feel a sense of pride, a sense of community, a sense of value, a sense of worth. And you can do that simply by following up with the donor, making that call and asking them, what's your story? What's your interest? What are you interested in being involved in? And making that second ask. But if we're not inviting people back, if we're not inviting people in any way, there is the opposite happening. People don't feel a sense of connection. People feel isolation. People feel loneliness. We've experienced this with organizations that we pre-pandemic were giving to regularly. And now the only thing we get from them is emails. Emails that are saying, what happened? Why are you coming back? But that's all we ever get are emails. And I have a sense of grief and loss about that. Like, these were organizations we were very invested in, and there is zero curiosity about where we are as donors, what we're interested in. But a single phone call saying, hey, I'm curious, what's going on with you? How are you? What are you investing your time in now? Could we invite you back? Could totally change what my giving pattern would be. So I think it's an important aspect for us to think about. How are we leveraging the connections and relationships and donors that have already shown interest versus continually trying to reach for more or new?
Well, and sometimes I get, it's a weird thing where I don't signal a new to me organization with $1,000 donation at the event. That's not how I signal. You haven't.
Your first gift is always
your
lowest.
You haven't earned $1,000 from me yet, because we're not in relationship. And so I think people get in that space of like, well, they donated, I can't ask them for more. It's like, I just sent up a flare to see if you want to, it's like, I don't even know how the dating apps work, but it's like swiper, like, it's like, I'm signaling interest. I'm showing you either I'm connected to someone at this table I'm sitting at and I'm supporting them, which you should also know. And then bring me into you directly. Or I'm intrigued by your work. I want to make sure that I support it in some way and get into your pipeline because I work in fundraising to see how you go from here. What does that look like? How are we in communication? How does that move forward? Does it hit me where I am and what I want to do? And so I think data is critical for folks when they're looking at evaluating their event. And I think sometimes they base a lot of things on hunch. So go into those meetings to talk about your event shape armed with data. Well, we have 300 people, but only a third of them ever give.
So let's talk about data for a second. In fact, I'm going to use the word that some people shy away from and talk about AI, because I think that what's happening right now in our sector is so many of our tools, all of our development tools, our CRM, our database tools are integrating AI.
Every single one platform is, yes.
And one of the things that it will do for you is identify who's a key target for this campaign, who's a key person that you maybe haven't kind of thought about yet. But I do want to encourage folks, or give a little plug for folks, that if this feels overwhelming, if it feels like, oh my God, we have all these donors, I'm new to this organization, I don't know any of them, I have no history, I have no stories, our database is a mess, it's not really that great. If you need help with that, that's what we do. Like, that's what we're happy to dive into and do, is that assessment, that analysis, and then that delineation of, this is the segment that I think you need to move in this direction, and this is the segment you need to move in that direction. And in it, this is how that event can look, and this is how that event can look, and here's your strategy and plan. So that is the piece of the puzzle that we spend our time in. That is, I think, our superpower, is that we're always trying to dive in, look at that data, analyze history, and understand sort of where you've been, and then lead with some inquiry to talk to donors and ask, where are you at? What's your investment level? And then start to design with, okay, if we were to gather 20 of our LAP sponsors together, What would our goal at that gathering be?
Yeah.
What would they be interested in? How do we design this for them? And how do we lead with like radical hospitality in a way that just is like so kind and loving and thoughtful that it says, we see you, that they immediately have a sense of connection, belonging, and want to stay involved and be involved.
Yeah.
That, I think, is what the opportunity is right now.
So let's talk a little bit about fundraising strategy at these events, because I think people are still looking at like, great connection, but also what does that look like in terms of potential for fundraising, whether it's now or we're growing in that way over the course of 3 years. Is there a different approach that people should make, or what should they be looking for?
Well, I think it is so specific to what you're trying to achieve and who your audience is. So when you're curating an event, we often design an event that we call our top 40, which is like, how do we curate for just our top 40 donors and create something that's specific to them that actually gets really deep into, this is the impact you've had over your 10 years of donating. This is the like work you've done. And we're going to create an experience that allows all of you to be in community and create a connection together. So that those folks who have shown, oftentimes they're like former board members, they're former leaders of the organization, they're major donors that have been very invested, that we bring them all together and we say, you are the people that financially make this work possible. And we want you to know each other. We want you to feel connected to each other. We want you to be able to share resources and uplift each other because you all have the same investment in this mission. So what's possible when we all collaborate together?
Yeah.
So for that type of top 40 event where we're talking about this very curated audience of big stakeholders, that conversation, the question becomes, or the ask becomes, what can we do next?
Yeah.
How can we address this need?
Yeah.
It's less often about finances. And at that point, oftentimes it's about resources that they can bring to the table. But it may be that I have 5 former board members who, after they left the board, they haven't been involved again. But before they left, when they were on the board, they were very invested and very big donors. Maybe it is a lunch date with those 5 folks, naming that and simply saying, we clearly have these incredible board members who give their time and their service. And then when they leave the board, there's not a further relationship. How can we improve this? Maybe the ask is for advice. Yep. Maybe the ask is for support in developing a program or a protocol for when people leave the board.
Yep.
So I think your ask has to be very specific to what the need is that you're trying to achieve. But at any event, regardless of how big or how small, you should always have an ask. And if it is fundraising related, it needs to be easy to be a part of.
Yes.
So it can't be go find our donation page on our website sometime within the next week. It can't be self-directed, right? It needs to be, will you today at this table make a pledge? Here's a pledge card. Will you today get out your phone and text to donate and help us in achieving this goal? Or when you leave here today, you have an email in your inbox and we want to see your support through a way that shows that support, like their name shows up on a thermometer or their name, is a follow-up. One group that we designed an event for, they had this really tight group of 10 people that had been former chairs and committee members with their big gala. And once they had finished their time serving, they no longer participated, came back to the gala, gave to the gala. And yet over about a 4-year period, they had been the biggest donors. We had a dinner with these 10 people. And the ask we made in that event was, collectively, you used to support this gala event with over $50,000 of support. And we understand that you have spent so much time on this gala. If we can't get you reinvested in the gala, can we still see support from you all? Our goal is $10,000 from you as a group. And so we're going to send you a donation link. And then that became a thread of an email that started with, This is great. Kurt is in at 5,000. This is fantastic. We have Sam in at 1,000. Oh, this is amazing. Kristen just gave 500. And it became this like constant conversation of them cheering each other on. And within 24 hours, they had like blown through that goal. And then they were all now in a conversation thread together talking about what else they could do.
I think it's so specific and actionable.
Yeah, specific, easy, and actionable.
Specific, easy, and actionable. But also, I think getting at, and we talked about this at Elevate when we were getting folks to start thinking about what the purpose of their event is.
Right.
Getting at the idea of what is possible when this group of people come together. And also that group of people being able to ideate about that as well, which is what that email says to me, right?
Right.
So we put this group of people, or the organization put this group of people together and initiated this email chain. And then they started to dream together.
Yeah.
And I think as organizations, we forget that donors need each other.
Yeah.
That donating in isolation doesn't
Build community.
Yeah. And it doesn't actually cultivate me as a donor in the way that you could if I felt like I was part of a collective doing this action, that we were working toward a purpose together. And so these smaller events are a very interesting way for donors to be able to look across the room at one another and to actually see what the community is around them, who's invested, the level at which they care and are ready to make a difference. And so you leave that event not only like psyched about the organization and what they're doing, but also psyched like, I was at this table of 10 people who are really invested in where we live.
Right.
And that is a very different way to go home.
Yeah. You mentioned where we live, and I want to talk a little bit about the fact that we as organizations often have experiences that we undervalue.
Yeah.
Right. So, for example, perhaps we're an environmental organization and we have access to land, or we have knowledgeable people on our team about habitats, fish, stars, wildlife. That experience of taking someone out on the land, or giving them an overnight hike, or giving them an experience to actually go and learn how the best way to cast a, fly rod in this particular river, that is something that I think we undervalue. We undervalue the fact that in our missions, in our work, whether it's education, whether it's land, whether it's, any number of causes,
right,
that we have connections and relationships to people who are expert and bring something to the table. So I would encourage you to think about, if you're getting ready to kick off, and think about, how do we re-invite people back in? There's two things I want to encourage folks to do. One, think about the resources you have. Who do you have relationships to? You might have resources like, we actually have a bunch of student chefs, or we have a bunch of, ties to photographers. How do we leverage them? Or artists, how do we leverage them? That you think about what the resources are that you can give people access to. And then when you think about the groups you want to design for, invite one of those people for a conversation that is just an advice session.
Yeah.
There's an adage of, if you want money, ask for advice. And if you want advice, ask for money. And it's very true. If you were to say, for example, I want to gather our 20 donors that have or 20 sponsors that haven't given in the past year, and invite them back in. Call the one that you have the closest relationship with and say, okay, I have this idea. What are your thoughts? And what do you think people would be interested in? They'll design the whole event for you. They'll tell you, we don't have a lot of time in the corporate giving world, but we love being able to get together. If there is an opportunity to have lunch, something simple brought in, and a quick conversation, that would probably be really meaningful. Or an opportunity to collaborate on something, they'll design it for you. So think about resources you have that you can bring to the table, and then think about who your audience is, and ask one of those folks to help you with feedback or ideas that then you can design off of.
Yeah. I mean, if you want folks to come and it to be relevant to them, you can't design in a vacuum.
Yeah. We had Paige Jacobs on, who was one of the planners who attended Elevate. She was on our planner roundtable, and she said, I just started finding that the best events were the events that I myself want to go to.
That's right.
Right. So if we're specifically trying to design for a targeted audience, we need to make sure that it's what they want to go to.
Yes.
Yeah.
We all want to attend
Simple,
things.
right?
We want to attend things that were built for us to attend. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get in the fundraising elevator.
Change. It doesn't happen on its own. It happens on purpose. Thanks to nonprofits that believe a brighter future is not just possible, but needed and deserved. And that connect people to causes and turn moments of generosity into movements. That's why Bloomerang is built for purpose. To raise the bar on what's possible and help every act of giving lead to more. Because when the bottom line is a better world, no goal is too lofty. Bloomerang, built for purpose.
Welcome back. We are talking to our very own Samantha Swaim about small curated events. Come on into the fundraising elevator with me. What is that one parting thought, last piece of advice you'd offer our nonprofit superheroes out there so that they can keep heading up?
Keep it simple and invite people back. I think that overcomplicating, overthinking, over makes too many roadblocks that people don't invest in. That it may be as simple as just inviting someone to lunch. It may be as simple as asking your board to meet in person once instead of via Zoom. But invite people back in the way that is the least stressful on your team, but is hospitality forward and says, we see you, we value you, and that your work matters.
Yeah, because in a time of tech acceleration and a lot of things going on, somebody reaching out with a personal invite saying, I see you, you're valuable, that's huge.
Absolutely.
If folks' interests have been piqued and they want to learn more about your work, where and how should they do that?
Well, so there's a number of places, but I want to encourage folks when they reach out to be targeting a couple of things. So you can reach out to us through any of our social media, our website. We have an RFP form on our website, LinkedIn, I'm very active on. But I want to encourage that if you are looking to develop or design a different strategy for inviting people back in, we are happy to partner with you on that. It is something that we feel like we are able to really look at data, try to pull through the stories, talk to you about need and impact, and help you to do something that is feels reasonable for the time and capacity you have. So even just like developing that plan can, I think, sometimes go a long way, both for you, your board buy-in, your staff sign off. So that's what I would encourage folks to look into is how to develop that assessment and develop that strategic plan.
Love that. Thanks for the time today.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen.
Great to talk to you.
The Fundraising Elevator is produced by Swaim Strategies at the studios of the AV department. The program is produced and directed by Steve Osborne, with audio engineering and original music by Dwayne Anderson and Heidi Christensen. Video production by John Collier. Graphic design by Pendulum Creative Group. And voiceover by Josh Boykin.
Hey y'all, it's Kristen. Before we leave, I want to ask for your help to make the podcast grow. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please like, follow, and subscribe to the Fundraising Elevator. And if you're getting a lot out of the show, share it with a friend. Leave us a review. These things help make sure that the podcast continues heading up. Thanks so much for being here and tuning in.
Are you ready to engage supporters and grow your base with your own podcast? Then let us introduce you to our partners at the AV department in Portland, Oregon. In addition to delivering exceptional live event audiovisual production and videography, they also have a top-tier production studio and an expert team ready to take your content ideas to the next level. Contact the AV department to schedule a consultation and start bringing your podcast vision to life.